What's up guys, it's Tommy here and welcome to a major update in the Manchester City court case against the Premier League, and there has been the ruling which was published this morning, and Manchester City of course are claiming victory, but if you analyze the 174 pages about the associated party transaction arbitration judgment, it's clear that Manchester City lost a lot more than they won. They actually the Premier League was found to be unlawful in just two separate cases of details, but the main argument that Man City wanted to throw out the fair market value sponsorship deals. They wanted the sponsorship deals to be just whatever they want, and that has been upheld. That's the major victory for the Premier League, and I think for all of football, because imagine if Newcastle or Man City could just write a blank check for themselves, because they are owned by Saudi Arabia and by the United Arab Emirates. In the case of Manchester City, they could get their own companies to sponsor their own football clubs for whatever money that they want, and then football would be over in England as a competitive sport. And Sam Wallace has a brilliant article in the Telegraph newspaper. Forget Manchester City's triumph, the losses outweigh the wins in landmark ruling. That's the title. And of course Manchester City are trying to spin this as a victory against the Premier League, but the 115 or 130 financial fair play rule breaches and charges against Man City will still come down hard on them, because they couldn't overturn the major ruling that you have to have your sponsorships with fair market value in the Premier League. That has been upheld. The Premier League's financial controls have taken a buffeting, but they have stood firm. Challenge after challenge to the crucial component, the associated party transaction laws were judged by the Tribunal to have failed. That key rule, which prevents owners using inflated sponsorship deals to inject equity disguised as commercial revenue into their club stands. The funny money has stopped at the gate. The funny money has stopped at the gate. Let me repeat that. So Manchester City can't keep funneling money through illegal means, through inflated sponsorship deals into their club. So what do you think about this verdict? Are you happy with this? And this just means that Man City are even more likely to get relegated and to get punished, because they have been inflating artificially their sponsorship deals for like 10 years, going back until 2009. So let me know how do you feel about this in the comments below, and if you enjoy these videos, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to keep up to date with this case. So Sam Wallace writes, what is striking throughout is that over and again the judgment acknowledges that for effective controls to exist, currently the profit and sustainability rules, then so too must the associated party transaction rules exist as well. So Man City's legal team won 3 rounds of this heavyweight fight, if you want to call it that, but there were many more that it lost. So little has changed as a result of arbitration. It is hard to discern what victory might look like for the club. So Man City argued that these associated party transaction rules, the sponsorship deals, could not possibly value different sponsorships for different entities accurately. That was rejected by the tribunal. The club argued that the Premier League is using these APT rules to adjust the value of compliant commercial income, and that was like price fixing. That was what Man City were saying, but that was rejected by the tribunal. And also Man City argued that these APT compliant commercial income was also price fixing. That was rejected as well. The club argued that the APT rules unnecessarily delayed the payment of commercial considerations while the Premier League examined whether they are fair market value or not. That was rejected by the tribunal as well. So a lot of things that Man City wanted to push through was rejected by the tribunal. So overall, I think the Premier League won this case in a lot of ways. Of course, there are some instances where the Premier League was deemed to be unlawful in some of the processes, but they are amending the rules, they are changing the rules a little bit, tweaking them, so it will be a lot fairer. And I think the one thing that Man City won by is that the Premier League thought they could judge whether a sponsorship deal was fair market value or not through looking at a database that the Premier League created, and that database contains all the previous sponsorships, so they could actually look at previous sponsorships and judge a new sponsorship deal whether it's fair market value or not. And when a club asked to see those numbers, the Premier League said, just trust me, bro, we have this database, but you can't look at it. Now, instead of the clubs needing to prove to the Premier League that the sponsorship deals are fair market value, now the Premier League can't just rely on this database. They have to be a lot more transparent with their process as well. Man City argued also that APT rules passed directly after Newcastle was bought by Saudi Arabia. They were introduced to curtail the ambitions of those clubs owned by states or individuals. That was rejected as well. Man City argued that APT rules did not set out a clear criteria and right of review. That was rejected by the Tribunal as well. So the list goes on and on and on, but a lot of what Man City argued against the Premier League was rejected. And some of this case felt surreal, Sam Wallace writes. At one point, Man City even argued that it lost a commercial deal to a potential partner that eventually chose to sign a deal with the Premier League themselves. And Man City spent tens of millions of pounds on legal fees, on lawyers and arbitrators, and their counsel successfully argued that shareholder loans should be subject to APT rules in the future, although that may not be the volcano that some seem to hope. So this is what Man City got for their enormous legal bill. The rules will not be backdated from the moment that these additions are made. PSR likely only has around 9 months to run until it is replaced by the new so-called squad cost financial controls. And interest on shareholder loans is not currently planned to be included. And we also need to mention that the Tribunal pointed out that any commercial deal between the Premier League and third party can be vetoed by the clubs. Also, it noted, for the purposes of the record, although one might have assumed the point was self-evident, the Premier League is not a football club, and all its income from commercial agreement is distributed equally to all of its clubs. It rejected Man City's argument that the Premier League itself should be subject to these associated party transaction rules. And if nothing else, this judgment is a fascinating insight into the scale of the legal challenge that Man City bring to the table. Complaint after complaint against the Premier League. I mean, when was it? It never happened this before. That one of the clubs in the Premier League are suing the league itself. And Man City failed miserably in like 23 of the 25 arguments that they made, they failed. But because they won in 2 of the 25 arguments that they made against the Premier League, they are calling this a victory. I mean, that's just laughable, really. And the BBC has a pretty fantastic article summarizing this case and what it all means, the Man City against the Premier League legal case verdict. So Man City had 2 complaints upheld and 2 aspects of the APT rules deemed unlawful by a tribunal, but 23 other complaints have been rejected. Other complaints made by Man City against the Premier League have been rejected by the tribunal. They rejected the majority of Manchester City's challenges, and they endorsed the overall objectives, framework and decision making of the associated party transaction system. So this is the most important thing about this verdict, that the tribunal upheld the associated party transaction rules and that they need to be fair market value. So Man City can't write themselves a blank check, or Etihad Airways, who is owned by the same guy or the same state that owns Man City. They can't just write a £600 million sponsorship deal to themselves. They still need to be fair market value. The tribunal, in a 175-page document, ruled that shareholder loans should not be excluded from the scope of associated party transaction rules, and that some amendments made in February by the Premier League should not be retained. So this is the only thing that Man City won in this case. And I think it's very curious that Chelsea, Everton and Newcastle United all acted as witnesses for Man City. So yeah, they are all, have state ownership, or in the case of Everton, they have some links to state ownership. While there were a lot of witnesses against Man City, witnesses for the Premier League, Liverpool, Manchester United, Arsenal, Tottenham, Brighton, West Ham, and also Brentford, Bournemouth, Wolves and Fulham wrote letters in support of the rules. And Simon Leaf, who is a head of sport at law firm Mission de Rayo, told BBC, "Whilst the decision will be embarrassing for the Premier League because in a couple of narrow areas the rules have been found to be unlawful, generally speaking, the decision confirms that the vast majority of these associated party transaction rules are indeed lawful. Therefore, whilst we can expect to see some changes to the rules going forward, on the whole, this isn't a resounding victory for Manchester City by any stretch of the imagination." And of course, Man City and their fans are trying to spin this as a victory. So if you read somebody who is claiming that this is a victory for Manchester City, then they are either, in the pockets of Man City, they are pushing their agenda, or they haven't really read and analyzed the verdict properly. The tribunal said that these associated party transaction rules are necessary, and that if prices above fair market value were paid, then the Premier League, the competition in football, will be distorted as the club would be benefiting from a subsidy. And that is just common sense, I think. And I'm really happy that finally this has been put to rest. So Man City can't argue anymore that their sponsorship deals are fair market value, because they are not. And hopefully the Premier League will be punishing Manchester City to the full extent. I mean, the Premier League should be now even more angry at Manchester City for making a lawsuit against them. The league also said the tribunal had rejected Man City's argument that the object of the APT rules was to discriminate against clubs with ownership from the Gulf region. So the Premier League will look to change the two aspects that the tribunal ruled against the league on. That means integrating the tribunal's assessment of shareholder loans and removing some of the February amendments. It says it is conducting a process that can allow the league and clubs to enact those specific changes quickly and effectively. Both sides are claiming victory, of course, and in truth the judgment contains something for both Man City and the Premier League. The Premier League sources are emphasizing the fact that most of City's challenges to the APT rules failed and they got rejected by the tribunal, and that the wider system was endorsed by the panel, and that's the most important thing. And they also seem confident that the rules will be swiftly amended by the clubs within 2 weeks in order to make them lawful. And the panel's ruling that the exclusion from the rules of interest-free loans from owners to their clubs, which is called shareholder loans, was unlawful, has led to concerns that clubs could be hit with additional costs, and Everton are in the most danger of again breaching profit and sustainability rules and regulations because of this. And this could have major ramifications for clubs who own tens or hundreds of millions of pounds of loans to their owners or shareholders. So in this verdict, 8 separate areas are claimed in which City have failed in their claim are identified. However, in the verdict, it outlines the declaration that injunctive relief and damages can be sought. So this could be a financial problem for the Premier League, depending on whether Man City pursue a claim, which they have indicated they will, and what the size of it is. So Man City would seek to claim damages from the Premier League because of the 2 unlawful instances or unlawful claims that Man City, found. And an even greater issue that in this verdict there is some number of Premier League's rules that are pointed out to be unlawful as they don't include shareholder loans. It is this which forms the basis of Man City saying the Premier League has violated UK competition law. In order to change the rules, the Premier League will need 14 clubs to vote in favour. However, some of the clubs benefit from shareholder loans at 0% rates or some very beneficial rates. So getting the rule changes required may not be straightforward. So ultimately the Premier League feels it is okay after this latest decision because of the number of allegations dismissed, but it remains to be seen whether their claim reaction is justified. However, Man City, the way they responded to this verdict, they think that they spotted a weakness in Premier League's regulations and they will look to exploit it as far as they can. Man City and their owners are absolutely shameless. They have money beyond anyone's wildest dreams, and they will try to sue the Premier League as much as they can, and they will try to get away with literally cheating and breaking the rules for 10-15 years. So that's the challenge that the Premier League face, and I will keep you guys updated in the future as well. Thanks for watching, have a nice day, see you later, goodbye.